So thanks to the organizers for the very nice conference so far. I will apologize to the perimeter folk because the only other place where I've talked about this work is at PI, and mysteriously, for unknown reasons, a very large contingent of Perimeter Institute folks are attending this conference. So I'm going to be telling you about this paper that I put out about a year ago on primordial non-Gaussianity during the epoch of Reionization, and exploiting this so-called zero bias feature, which I think is something really cool and really cute. So just as a recap, we've heard a lot about this conference so far, in the conference so far, but in the presence of, a primordial potential that looks like this, where you have a quadratic non-Gaussianity contribution, which comes from multi-field models of inflation, for example, you end up inducing a new term in the bias expansion for bias traces of large-scale structure, which has this sort of equivalence principle violation. So you get this sort of large-scale either decrement or large-scale enhancement in the power spectrum, which was first pointed out in this paper by Neil, Olivier, Dragan, and company about 20 years ago. And as we've heard, there's a lot of interest in searching after this effect. Mostly what we've heard about so far is going to sort of very large volume and very high bias tracers, such as quasars and things like that. But there was an alternative proposal that came out in a paper by Emanuele and Urosh back in 2018, where they sort of make the following argument. If you write down what the Fisher matrix is for primordial non-Gaussianity for one k-bin, so you're not sort of integrating over all of the different modes in your survey, you get a very simple expression that looks like this, assuming you fix the linear bias, but you can marginalize it out, and that's also okay. And they kind of point out that there are two limits that you can take with this expression. The first limit is basically the sort of large noise limit, where you're not necessarily cosmic variance dominated, in which case the Fisher matrix will scale with the linear bias of the tracer that you're looking at to sort of the fourth power, and the number density to the second power. And this motivates, if you don't have a cosmic variance limited survey, especially at these very large scales, which is very difficult to do, then really what you want to do is go after really massive, really large tracers like quasars. But then they say, imagine that you were in the scenario where the noise was actually very subdominant. Then you basically get this curious result where the Fisher matrix goes as 1 over b squared. And not only that, it sort of, diverges as b goes to 0. So in principle, if you could find a tracer of primordial non-Gaussianity, or any tracer that had 0 linear bias, somehow this would actually be optimal in constraining FNL local. And in their paper, Emanuele and company tried to build this construction, a sample that looks like this from galaxies, sort of a weighted combination of galaxies depending on where their environment is underdense or overdense, exploiting some assembly bias effect. And it turns out to be pretty complicated. That said, so are there any other tracers in nature where this linear bias could be 0? That was a thing that I've always been wondering about. So actually, if we go now to very high redshifts during the epoch of reionization, and we look at the brightness temperature fluctuations of 21 centimeter radiation, a common expression that you'll find in textbooks, for example, is that it goes as something like the combination of all these different terms. This is just sort of a global normalization to the temperature, which just depends on some known parameters. You basically get this term here, which is the sort of density of neutral hydrogen. So people normally write this as, the matter density fluctuation plus a fluctuation in the neutral fraction. A term related to the spin temperature of neutral hydrogen, which I'll ignore, but could matter, and then a term that just sources redshift space distortions, which don't change this argument qualitatively. And a thing that was pointed out in many papers about 15 years ago or so by people, including Adam here in the audience, is that since the fluctuations, deviations from neutral hydrogen are sourced by these ionization bubbles that also track the dark matter halos, if you look at 21 centimeter fluctuations during the epoch of reionization, you actually get the scale-dependent bias imprinted in the signal as well. And the thing that I think is interesting is that, yes, this is a large-scale effect, but even in the presence of foreground subtraction, they point out that the volumes at high redshift are large enough that you can actually get really good constraints on this effect if you had a sufficiently good 21 centimeter survey. So let's think a little bit about the 21 centimeter field as a biased tracer. I'm going to neglect these two terms, as I've said, but you can ask me about them later. What people have traditionally done when thinking about the 21 centimeter field as a biased tracer is to basically expand the neutral hydrogen fraction really as a bias expansion in the ionization fluctuation field. And it turns out that this quantity, if you have an excursion set-based model of reionization, these bias coefficients that show up, you can actually compute them analytically given a mass function. And so this goes back to these papers by Steve Filinetto and Matt McQuinn and company, where they study these bias expansions for the ionization fluctuation field, and Adam also revisited this in his paper. And so if we make this bias expansion and we study the linear bias of the 21 centimeter field, you get an expression that looks like this, which is a combination of two terms. So this is kind of interesting because this is just the neutral hydrogen fraction. The evolution of the neutral hydrogen fraction is monotonic. The universe starts and it's fully neutral, and then it ionizes, and neutral hydrogen fraction goes to 0 on large scales. And then this term, which is just the converse of that, so this is strictly increasing, and then the linear bias of the ionization bubbles, which also increases. So we now have a competition where the linear bias of the 21 centimeter field is a decreasing function being subtracted from an increasing function. And so under these very general assumptions, no matter what your model of reionization is, it turns out that the 21 centimeter field is a zero bias tracer, at least during some sort of privileged epoch. And what's kind of interesting is that this is seen across the literature. If you actually go and look at papers that have tried to study this, for example, these Thiessen radiative hydrodynamic simulations, you get a zero crossing where the ionization fraction is around 15%. In Matt and Anson's paper in 2018 with radiative transfer simulations, they also see this. And you can also go to, for example, 21 centimeter fast and measure this cross correlation, and you see that it will also cross 0 at a redshift of like 10-ish for this fiducial model that I use, which corresponds to 15%. So sort of no matter what the astrophysics is, no matter what model you're assuming, somehow at around 10 to 20% ionization fraction, sorry, this should be ionization, you get this zero bias epoch. So, well, could we use this to trace primordial non-Gaussianity? If we could find it in the real universe, if we could go after this epoch, could we use it to pin down PNG? There's one thing that actually you have to think about, though, which is that what really matters is that you're in this limit where this noise term is negligible. A thing that Emanuele and company took great care of to study is whether this Poisson shot noise approximation held. And they upgraded this 1 over n bar term to what they call the stochasticity function, which they measured in their samples. And for 21 centimeter field, the story is a bit different. If you actually go back and read the literature, the forecasts had only assumed thermal noise for the instrument, and that there was basically no shot noise, no sampling noise coming from neutral hydrogen. And so it thought it was worth revisiting this question of what is the stochasticity of the 21 centimeter field. And naively, it's 0. Because this will go as sort of the mass density of neutral hydrogen emitters or the number density of neutral hydrogen molecules, which is about a gazillion, right, in appropriate units. But for the low redshift intensity mapping community, people have known that the stochasticity is actually quite large. So there's these two really nice papers by Andrea Buyan and by Simon Foreman and company, where they basically study the low redshift neutral hydrogen field, and they find a very large contribution to the stochasticity function from these sort of quadratic terms in the bias expansion that show up, which take this functional form. And in fact, if you look at Simon's paper, you can see that the size of this noise field, this sort of renormalized shot noise, is extremely large. It's much larger than the sort of experimental sensitivity that you would get for chord or for different variations of Puma. So we really need to care about it. And this is something that is unavoidable if you're studying a power spectrum analysis. So in this paper, I went back and looked at 4 different kinds of noise, and this is a little bit technical, and I don't have time to go into them. But I basically measured this pure stochasticity function, this S of k, which is the cross spectrum between the p halo halo minus p halo matter squared over p matter matter, but for the 21 centimeter field, which looks like this function here, and I fit a template to it. An analysis where if you're using, for example, a field level inference or the bispectrum in some way or a cross spectrum, you can pin down the size of this amplitude, this B2 amplitude, and subtract it out. And you get something that looks like this, which still has a large scale bump because of the presence of these so-called large scale ionizing background fluctuations, which I'm happy to tell you more about later. Some sort of noise level where you do manage to mitigate both of these, but there's still some residual noise in your expansion. And then finally, just a shot noise calculation for the shot noise of ionization bubbles, which is the sort of true sampling error for this field. And so if we put all of these together, this is, super simplified toy survey. I just wanted to understand the impacts of these different noise levels around this epoch. So what I'm showing are surveys with a bandwidth of delta nu of 6 megahertz, which corresponds to this redshift range, depending on where it's centered, between redshift sort of 7 and 14. So just imagine you're doing several small 21 centimeter surveys where you can control for foregrounds within this bandwidth. And I'm just plotting the sort of inferred error bar that I would get on the on FNL. We find something quite interesting, right? Two interesting conclusions. One is that if you don't control for this B2 noise, which is the difference between this orange curve and the other curves, you basically are always going to have a very degraded inference on FNL compared to what other papers of the literature had assumed. Other people had claimed you could get to FNL of 1 or less with a survey like this. And this turns out to not be the case. This is just an effective shot noise floor that really kills your constraining power. The second thing, which is kind of interesting, is that the zero bias epoch for 21 centimeter turns out to actually be the worst possible place to search for primordial non-Gaussianity, unless you can sort of reach this exquisite calibration floor for this sort of residual noise in your analysis, or do some really fancy analysis. But that said, if you could find this, in the universe, it seems like the epochs adjacent to that are still actually where the error bars are the smallest. So there were some assumptions made in this forecast, but qualitatively this phenomenology holds, and we can understand it just from the expression for the Fisher matrix. So I think this is kind of interesting. I think these zero bias tracers, if we could identify one, are really powerful. Just to wrap up. And I think the 21 centimeter brightness temperature field during reionization is interesting because it just seems like it will generically exhibit this period of zero bias. As I mentioned, it's sort of difficult to actually apply this to probe local primordial non-Gaussianity, it turns out. But you could still get something by doing a more sophisticated analysis than just this power spectrum only modeling. There are a lot of 21 centimeter experts in the room. Please tell me about why this idea is stupid, why foreground modeling is really hard. I actually, would really like to know. But a thing that I want to point out is that this zero bias epoch, has to exist. It always exists. And it seems like its timing will tell us something about the nature of the sources of reionization. So I think it's also worth sitting down and thinking about, how can we find it? What can we learn about the ionization history of the universe if we do find it? For example, do we want to try to cross-correlate with high redshift galaxy samples or something like that? And then I'll also just plug very related work that came out as I was writing this paper by Adam Lids and collaborators, where they also look at zero crossings in the cross-correlation, but that are sourced actually from the global temperature evolution, from the spin temperature term, and not from the clustering bias itself. So that's what I had. Hopefully not too over. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, thanks for a really cool idea. So you had these basically redshift bins like delta nu, roughly 6 megahertz.
Yeah.
How much of this shifts if I think about doing an analysis on like the light cone with the, light cone effects in one go?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I didn't think about it too much. I guess, in some sense, I guess you would just be combining the results of all of these different surveys together, assuming that they're uncorrelated. But the reason I picked the 6 megahertz is because that's what the original papers quote as like a bandwidth where foregrounds can be controlled. Obviously, you'll go to lower K-min, which will really help you a lot if you could do the full light cone together. I mean, there are some challenges because then the signal evolves so much along the light cone that it's not really stationary. So you'd have to think about that as well, maybe doing like a frequency angular power spectrum or something like that. It's definitely worth looking at. I just wanted to sort of try the simplest possible thing to point out the idea.
Thanks. So, fascinating idea. I'm just trying to get the physics clear.
Yeah.
So throughout the derivation, it seems you relate this bias, the linear bias, to the global neutral hydrogen rate,
yes.
psi bar.
Yes.
And then at the time when you're exploring the short noise part, you also mentioned, it seems to me that it's flawed by that whatever noise left over the stochastic part, right?
Yes.
So that's causing some of the issues there. And you started to talk about the fluctuation of the spatial variations of these hydrogen being probably one of the contributor to the stochastic part.
Yes.
So you are kind of, it seems to my mind, you're dealing with a field which has the variation of the neutral hydrogen from which you measure the clustering. Mm-hmm. And globally combines, they give you this magic zero crossing.
Yes.
It seems to me, I still feel like it's somewhat contradictory, but can you?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of comes again from the idea that if you think of in the very early universe, right, before sort of reionization has turned on, and let's ignore spin temperature fluctuations because that's where dragons are and we don't really know what's going on. the universe is unclustered, essentially, or it's just some very small amount of clustering from the dark matter fluctuations, and it's just neutral. So there you expect that the bias of this tracer should just sort of be 1, right? Because the universe is, the neutral hydrogen is just tracing the dark matter exactly. Now, what the signal that you're actually measuring is the combination of, well, it's where you have neutral hydrogen. And so as you start to ionize, you will no longer be getting a signal from these regions. But, you know, the actual brightness temperature map is changing in a way where you have this now negative contribution because you're decorrelating the regions where the most massive halos are. And so in this sense, the signal that you're measuring is sort of the weighted contribution of the unclustered neutral hydrogen that's left over and this sort of negatively correlated region where you don't have any signal where you have structure. So like in the limit where it's fully ionized, right, you actually expect the bias to be negative because, well, it's only where you don't have any structure that you actually get neutral hydrogen emission. So physically, I think it's just the competition between these two effects. And basically, yeah, it turns out in this framework, any fluctuation in the field, any fluctuation in the field is really coming from fluctuations in the ionization fraction, which you can write as a bias tracer if you have a mass function for the bubbles. So hopefully that clarified a little bit.
Okay, a quick naive question. So how close to 0 would you like to be? So would, like, for example, redshift 2 line map of a forest get close enough? It's already like 0.2.
That's a good question. So I think, let me go to an extra slide about this. So it turns out that what you really want, so the original sort of limit in the Castorina paper doesn't actually exist. It turns out that if you write the simplified Fisher matrix in this way, where the linear bias is sort of the clock of your signal, this is just a polynomial where you can compute the roots exactly, and B1 equals 0 is terrible. And then it turns out that the Fisher information is actually maximized around the square root of basically the ratio between the noise power spectrum and the matter power spectrum for that wave number. So you would have to, for Lyman alpha, if you have 0.2 as the linear bias, you would have to think about what are the K modes that you're measuring. I think that would probably be too small scale for the scale-dependent bias to actually matter. That's one thing to think about. But then also, what is the sort of noise in the noise power spectrum and these competing effects? If you're in this ballpark where the linear bias is plus or minus this, then in principle it should work.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, super nice talk. Regarding the last point, maybe it's a question for Adam. So you said Adam's paper made a point that you also have a 0 bias because of the spin temperature evolution. So how do the two effects play together, or does it mean you have two epochs of 0 bias, or are they synchronized? Or?
Yeah, I think this is something I actually wanted to chat with Adam about a little bit. I think if you define bias as sort of the dimensionless cross spectrum of the field with matter divided by the matter power spectrum, the sort of separate universe definition, I think then there can only be this one because the global evolution won't play a role. And that's the one that actually matters for the Fisher forecast fundamentally. So I think the other epochs, and Adam's paper points this out, are really informative about constraining like when X-ray heating turns on, when these other effects in reionization happen. It's not necessarily clear to me. I try to play around with this a little bit. I don't think it will be a 0 bias epoch in this sense. Because all of these scalings are basically going to, these terms in the global temperature term is just going to drop out in the Fisher matrix because it shows up in the numerator and in the denominator. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, hi, thanks. This is really nice. I was wondering, so given that this is 0 bias epoch is important and informative about the astrophysics of what's going on during reionization, could you use the argument the other way around? Could you raster scan your epoch reionization data to see where the Fisher matrix goes, the error on the FNL blows up, so that you have an indication of this, where this 0 bias crossing should happen?
I guess, but if you have all of this technology already, it might just be easier to raster scan when the cross correlation goes from positive to negative with some tracer, right? That's what I would guess.
Thanks.
We're a few minutes behind, so let's save questions for the break.
Well, thanks for all the questions.